What if losing everything in one moment was the only way to find the life your heart was meant for? The setting sun painted the Colorado sky in deep shades of orange and red as Maylene Sinclair watched the train pull away from Silver Creek Station. The sound of the wheels faded fast, taking with it her hopes, her future, and every last cent she owned. She stood frozen, her small trunk beside her, the only thing the thief had failed to steal. In that moment, Maylene felt as if the world had been pulled out from under her feet. She had arrived from Pennsylvania with a ticket to San Francisco and a promise of a teaching job that would change her life. But everything had gone wrong within minutes. A pickpocket on the platform had slipped away with her purse and her ticket. She had searched desperately, panic rising in her chest, and missed the boarding call. Now the train was gone, and so was every plan she had made. Her breath came fast. Dust swirled around her boots. She felt alone in a place she had never seen before. A deep voice broke through her fear. "Looks like you're having a mighty rough day, miss." Maylene turned. A tall cowboy walked toward her, his weather-beaten hat pulled low. His denim shirt showed the wear of long days in the sun, and his leather vest marked him as a working man. But it was his eyes that stopped her, steady, kind, and full of concern. "The train," she managed, pointing helplessly at the empty tracks. "I was robbed. My ticket, my money, everything." The man's expression hardened. "Town's been crawling with thieves lately. Sheriff hasn't done a thing about it." He studied her with quiet thoughtfulness, then extended his hand. "Name's Henry Morgan. I've got a ranch about 5 miles outside town." She placed her gloved hand in his without thinking. "Maylene Sinclair." Henry glanced at her trunk, then at the sinking sun. "Next train ain't coming till Thursday, 4 days from now. 4 days, no room money, no food money, no family, no safety." Her knees felt weak. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she whispered. She was 22, alone in the world after losing both parents, and she had sworn she would stand on her own 2 feet. But right now she felt very small. Henry removed his hat, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know we're strangers, Miss Sinclair, but I got a proposition for you." She looked up, wary yet hopeful. "My sister Clara lives with me. She's been weak since a bad illness last winter. She needs help around the house. If you're willing to lend a hand till the next train, I'll give you room and board." Maylene hesitated. Trusting a stranger was dangerous, but so was being alone without a dollar. Seeing her doubt, Henry added, "You'd have your own room, and Clara would be glad for the company." He pointed toward the main street. "She's over at the general store right now. You can meet her first. If you don't feel comfortable coming with us, I'll give you enough for a room and your train fare." Maylene blinked. Why would a man offer that kind of kindness? "Why would you help me like this?" she asked softly. A shadow crossed Henry's face. "Because I know what it feels like to be stranded with no one to turn to." Then he offered his hand again. "Come home with me, Miss Sinclair, at least until you're on your way again." Something in his voice, steady, honest, broke through her fear. She placed her hand in his once more. "Thank you. I accept." Henry nodded, a hint of a smile breaking the rough line of his jaw. "Good. Let's find Clara and head out before dark." As they walked down the street, Maylene felt the weight on her shoulders ease slightly. She didn't know this man. She didn't know this place. But for the first time since losing her purse, she felt a spark of hope. Inside the general store, Clara Morgan proved even warmer than Henry had described. She had bright eyes, a soft smile, and a gentle energy, despite the careful way she moved. "Oh, I'm so pleased to meet you," Clara said, looping her arm through Maylene's as if they'd known each other forever. "It gets awfully dull with just Henry and old Walter to talk to." Quote, Soon the wagon was loaded with supplies, Maylene's trunk was secured, and the three headed toward the ranch. As they left Silver Creek behind, the land opened wide, rolling hills, tall pines, and distant mountains glowing under the fading light. "It's beautiful," Maylene breathed. "Wait till morning," Henry said. "Colorado's something special at sunrise." Clara laughed. "He only gets poetic during chores." "Don't let him fool you." Henry shot her a teasing glare that made Meline smile for the first time that day. When the Morgan Ranch came into view, a modest but well-kept house, a barn, a creek running near the yard, Meline felt her heart tighten with a strange warmth. It looked peaceful, safe, like a place where something new might begin. Inside, the house was tidy and welcoming. Clara led her to a small guest room overlooking the creek. "This was our parents' room," Clara said softly. "We keep it for visitors." "You lost your parents?" Meline asked gently. "5 years ago, influenza," Clara replied. "Henry and we've made do since." Quote, "Dinner was simple, stew, bread, and kind company. Afterward, they sat on the porch, listening to crickets and watching stars blink alive in the dark sky." "Thank you," Meline said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without your kindness." "No need for thanks," Henry said. Then, softer, "Anyone would have done the same." Clara scoffed. "That's not true. Many would have left her standing at that depot alone." Meline shivered at the thought. Henry leaned back in his chair. "How'd you end up traveling alone?" Meline explained her parents' passing, her job in Harrisburg, and the promise of a better position in San Francisco. "The school expects me in 2 weeks," she finished. "I still plan to go, even with this delay." Henry watched her with quiet attention. "And if something gets in the way?" She had no answer. For the first time, she wasn't certain. Later, as Clara went to bed, Henry paused before leaving the porch. "You fit in here," he said softly, "more than you know." Then he tipped his hat. "Rest well. Morning comes early on a ranch." Quote, when Meline was alone, she stared out into the Colorado night. She had never felt so far from home, yet somehow not entirely lost. Something about this place felt different. Something about Henry. Something about the way her heart beat when he looked at her, as if the world had shifted without asking her permission. She didn't know what the next 4 days would bring, but she sensed they would change everything. The storm clouds built slowly through the afternoon, stacking over the mountains like great gray walls as Meline settled into life at the Morgan Ranch. By late morning, she had already helped Clara prepare breakfast, washed dishes, swept the kitchen, and hung laundry on the line. The simple work felt grounding, almost comforting after the panic of losing everything at the station. Clara soon brought out a worn copy of The Woman in White and asked if Meline would read aloud. Sunlight filled the parlor, catching the bright colors of Clara's quilts as Meline's voice carried through the quiet house. They read until lunchtime, when it was time to take sandwiches to Henry and Walter in the fields. The moment they reached the north pasture, Meline felt her cheeks warm. Henry and Walter were both working shirtless in the heat, muscled backs flexing as they repaired a broken fence. Henry didn't see her at first, but when he finally turned, the surprise on his face was quickly replaced by a flustered motion as he grabbed his shirt. "Didn't expect company," he said, clearing his throat. Clara laughed. "If you didn't want company, you should have kept your shirt on." Meline tried to act unbothered, but her heart thudded in her chest as she handed him his lunch. They ate together beneath a tall pine tree as a warm wind rustled through the branches above. Henry asked about her teaching, about her students back in Pennsylvania, about the life she hoped to build in San Francisco. "You'd make a fine teacher for Silver Creek," Walter commented, wiping his mouth with a handkerchief. "Ours now is no good. Town's children deserve better." Henry shot the older man a look. "Walter." "What?" "It's true," Walter muttered. Before Meline could answer, thunder rumbled in the distance. Henry's eyes lifted to the darkening sky. "Storm's coming fast," he said. "You ladies head home. We'll finish here and follow." The storm hit before they were halfway back. Cold rain came down in thick sheets, and the wind howled through the hills. Clara shouted over the noise, pointing ahead. "There's a line shack just over the ridge." They urged their horses through the wind until the small cabin appeared, standing strong against the pounding rain. Inside it was dry and stocked with supplies. Meline lit a lamp while Clara built a fire, both women soaked through but relieved. "Henry always keeps these shacks ready," Clara said, shivering slightly. Hours passed before the door burst open and Henry and Walter stumbled in, soaked to the bone. Walter limped toward the fire, horse spooked in the lightning. He grumbled. I hit the ground harder than I would have liked. Clara hurried to him, worry etched across her face. Meline helped Henry remove his dripping coat. His hands trembled from the cold, and when she gently touched his arm, he looked at her with gratitude, softening his features. You two all right? He asked. We made it here fine, Clara said. But her voice carried a faint rasp that made Henry frown. The storm raged for hours, trapping them together in the small cabin. They made coffee, heated beans, and tried to keep spirits high. Walter told stories from his days in Texas. Henry teased Clara, and Meline found herself laughing more than she had in months. But as night fell, it became clear they would be sleeping there until dawn. There were only 2 narrow bunks, and the floor was damp. Ladies, take the bunks, Henry said. Walter and I will sleep by the fire. Clara shook her head. Henry, you're freezing. You can't sleep on the floor. Before they could argue, Meline stepped forward. Clara and I can share a bunk. Walter should have the other. Henry can sleep by the fire where it's warm. Henry hesitated, but finally nodded. That night, as rain hammered the roof and wind howled outside, Meline lay awake beside Clara. The glow of the fire cast soft shadows on the walls. Across the cabin, Henry sat polishing his rifle, checking it carefully despite the storm. He's been coughing, Clara whispered quietly. He won't admit it. The cold makes it worse. I noticed, Meline replied softly. Clara turned her head toward her. And I noticed he looks at you more than he realizes. Warmth rushed to Meline's face. Clara, he likes you, Clara said simply. And I think you like him. Meline didn't answer because she wasn't sure what she should say. She barely knew Henry. She was leaving in a few days, but her heart beat faster when he was near. She thought of his kindness, the way he listened, the way he had stepped in to help her when he didn't have to. Before she could respond, Clara drifted off to sleep. Sometime later, Meline opened her eyes again to find Henry sitting upright by the fire, staring quietly at her. His expression was unreadable in the shifting glow. When their eyes met, he dipped his head slightly, as if acknowledging a truth neither of them had spoken aloud. She felt her heartbeat quicken. Outside, the storm finally began to ease. When morning came, the sky was clear and the air smelled fresh and clean. They rode back to the ranch and immediately fell back into chores. Clara grew tired quickly and went to rest, leaving Henry and Meline working side by side in the yard. You handled yourself well yesterday, he said, handing her a bundle of fallen branches. Most folks would have fallen apart. Maybe I was too tired to fall apart, she said lightly. He looked at her for a long moment. You're stronger than you realize. The way he said it made her chest tighten. She looked away, busying herself with the branches, but she felt his gaze linger. That night, after Clara went to bed early, Henry stayed behind in the kitchen while Meline dried the last of the dishes. You should know, he began, leaning against the counter. Tomorrow's Sunday. We don't do much work then. I was thinking maybe we could ride into town. You could get whatever you need for your trip. The reminder of the coming train hit her harder than she expected. She forced a smile. That would be nice. Henry watched her closely. You'll still make it to San Francisco in time, won't you? I hope so, she answered honestly. But if something changes, I'll figure it out. His jaw tightened slightly. A flicker of something. Hope? Worry? Passed in his eyes. Meline, he said softly, you fit here, more than you know. She didn't know how to answer. She didn't know how to handle the feeling rising inside her, the sense that her life might be shifting without her meaning it to. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had known Henry Morgan for only 2 days. So why did she feel like she was standing at the beginning of something far bigger than she understood? The next morning came bright and calm. The storm washed away as if it had never happened. After breakfast, Clara read a passage from the family Bible, while Henry and Walter listened quietly. The small moment of peace felt comforting, almost like a true family gathering, something Meline had not experienced in years. When it was time, Henry hitched the wagon and helped her up. Clara stayed behind to rest, and Walter promised to keep an eye on things. As the wagon rolled towards Silver Creek, The soft spring breeze carried the smell of pine and wet grass. Meline found herself watching Henry as he handled the reins. There was something steady about him, something that made her feel grounded. Silver Creek on a Sunday was slow and quiet. Henry took her to the general store to buy the few things she needed. When the storekeeper mentioned the sheriff had caught one of the thieves, hope flashed in Meline's chest. "Did he recover a dark green purse?" she asked. "Sheriff still sorting through the stolen goods," the man said. "Might be worth checking." Henry led her toward the sheriff's office. Inside, the sheriff was sorting items on a table: wallets, handkerchiefs, brooches, rings. Meline scanned them, her heart sinking until she saw it. Her mother's embroidered handkerchief. Her breath caught. "This is mine," she whispered. The sheriff nodded. "There's more in the back." Quote, he returned with a small wooden box. Inside it lay her mother's cameo brooch. Tears stung her eyes as she lifted it gently. "This means more to me than the money ever did," she said. Henry watched her with something warm and protective in his eyes. "It suits you," he murmured. They left the sheriff's office and headed to the hotel restaurant for Sunday dinner. Meline felt oddly shy when the townspeople looked their way. Henry noticed and gave a small smile. "Don't mind them. They're just surprised to see me with a lady." "Will it cause gossip?" she asked, suddenly worried. He shrugged. "Probably, but you'll be on the train Thursday." The reminder felt like a stone dropping into her chest. They ate slowly, talking about her life back east, her hope for the San Francisco job, and Henry's attachment to Silver Creek. Then Henry asked the question she had feared. "What happens if the San Francisco job doesn't work out?" Quote. She hesitated. "I haven't thought about it." Henry set down his fork. "Silver Creek needs a teacher. Walter was right." Her heart fluttered unexpectedly. "You hardly know me," she murmured. "I know enough," Henry replied softly. "You're capable, patient, good with people. You'd make this town better." Something shifted between them, a tension, warm and uncertain. "I'll think about it," she said. On the ride home, both were quiet, lost in their thoughts. But when they crested the last hill, Henry suddenly tensed. Something's wrong. A strange horse stood tied outside the ranch house. As Henry pulled the wagon to a stop, a tall man stepped onto the porch, a deputy sheriff. "Rustlers," the man said grimly. "They hit nearby ranches last night, 4 or 5 of them, armed. Tracks lead this way." Fear shot through Meline. Henry turned to her. "Get inside. Stay with Clara." Inside, Clara grabbed a shotgun and taught Meline, quickly, urgently, how to load and fire it. Meline's hands shook as she learned. She prayed she wouldn't need to use it. Dusk fell and the men had not returned. Then a sound came from the barn. Clara slipped out to look, leaving Meline with the shotgun. Minutes later, Meline spotted Clara hiding behind a water trough and 3 armed men near the barn. Fear surged through her, but she forced herself to act. "Clara!" she called loudly from the porch. "Did you find anything?" Quote. The rustlers turned toward her voice. Clara fired a warning shot in the air. The men cursed and raised their guns. Suddenly, hoofbeats thundered from the north. Henry and the deputy rode into the yard. One rustler aimed his rifle. Without thinking, Meline fired. The shotgun blast boomed across the yard, throwing her back a step. The shot went wide, but it distracted the men long enough for Henry and the deputy to take cover. Gunfire erupted. Walter arrived from the south pasture, rifle ready despite his bad hip. Within moments, 2 rustlers were wounded and captured, and the leader was cornered and forced to surrender. Only when the danger passed did Meline step out, her knees shaking. Clara ran to Henry. "Are you hurt?" Henry checked his sister before turning to Meline. "You fired that shotgun," he said, voice thick with emotion. I didn't want them to hurt you," she whispered. Henry stared at her with something fierce and tender in his eyes. "You could have been killed. So could you." They stood locked in a moment that felt deeper than words. "I need to help the deputy," Henry finally said. "But when I'm back, we need to talk." "Yes," she agreed, her heart hammering. "We do." That night, when Henry returned, he found her already awake in the kitchen. They talked quietly over warm biscuits. He admitted how much he feared losing her. She admitted how deeply she cared for him already. Then Henry said the words that changed everything. "Silver Creek wants you as its teacher. And I want you here too, not just for the town, for me." She swallowed hard. "Henry, I wrote to San Francisco last night declining their offer." Shock crossed his face, then joy. "You did?" "I realized yesterday that I want to belong somewhere, and I think that place is here." He took her hand. "With me?" "With you," she whispered. From that moment, their future felt clear. She stayed at the ranch through May. She met the town council and accepted the teaching job. By early summer, she moved into the teacher's quarters, though she spent every weekend with Henry and Clara. Then, in a quiet Denver restaurant, Henry reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Malene Sinclair," he said softly, "would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Henry." Their wedding in August filled the Silver Creek Church. Clara cried joyful tears. Walter walked Malene down the aisle, proud as any father. When Henry kissed her as his wife, the whole town cheered. And as they danced that night on the ranch, surrounded by lantern light and friends, Malene knew she had found far more than shelter on the day the train left her behind. She had found home. 10 years later, with children playing around the ranch, Clara married the deputy sheriff, and Malene leaned against Henry on the porch, both of them watching the sun set over the land they had built together. Henry kissed her forehead. "I thank God every day for that missed train." Quote. She smiled, slipping her hand into his. "So do I."